if I'm giving someone critical feedback, it really always needs to be a video call. If I can't do a one-on-one meeting with them, I will literally just record a little video of myself talking and email it to them, because like you said, the context is so important.
Welcome to another episode of Outside the Valley, the podcast where we interview remote startup leaders, remote work advocates, and founders of distributed teams who thrive outside of Silicon Valley. They share insight on what works and what doesn't so you can learn to do it right. This podcast is brought to you by ARC, the remote hiring platform that helps you hire remote software engineers and teams easily. I'm your host, Jovian Gautama. Today we have Laura Roeder, CEO and founder of MeetEdgar. In this episode, we covered how Laura built a company that can run without her, why MeetEdgar has both a CEO and a president, and the importance of transparency in company culture. We also talked about why MeetEdgar doesn't believe in deadlines, which is kind of special, why they use the title advocates instead of managers, and how you can give better criticism and feedback in the remote team. Laura also has a special gift for Outside the Valley listeners. You can get 1 free month of MeetEdgar with the coupon code PODCAST, all caps. So you just go to MeetEdgar and input the coupon code PODCAST, PODCAST. I guess you probably already know how to spell that because you're listening to podcast now. Okay, so, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please do consider leaving a review on iTunes because that'll help other people like you to discover the podcast. So without further ado, here we go, Laura Roeder. Hey, Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jovian. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Laura, it's really a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been following your writings and your interviews for a while now. Like I mentioned before the call, I was slightly nervous to talk to you today. But yeah, I'm more than excited to learn more from you and about MeetEdgar.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to kick things off, just to introduce to people who are not that familiar yet with MeetEdgar and with you, can you share a bit more about your background and the company itself?
Yeah, so MeetEdgar is a social media marketing automation tool. So we're a tool for publishing your content to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the different social networks. I'm sure we have a lot of developers listening. Developers often really like us because we really automate a lot of the tasks for social media marketing. And developers are not scared of automation. They love it. So
Totally, yes.
yeah. So we save you a lot of time compared to other social tools. And my background, I've been an entrepreneur for, I guess, about like 12 years. So my whole career, I've been working for myself and various businesses. I've really always been in the social media marketing and online marketing space, either doing consulting and then e-courses and then software as I do today.
Right. When I reached out to you, so you realized that you're currently not active with the day-to-day of the company, and you have a president that do this. Can you share a bit more about the decision itself? Why you do that?
Yeah, so it's a path that I've been on really since we launched. So something really unusual about the launch. When we launched Edgar in 2014, I was pregnant with my first child. So I knew that I'd be taking parental leave within the first year of our startup, right? I took 3 months off. So and that was 6 months after launch. So it was unusual, but it was a really actually a great constraint because I had to build a company that would be
Right.
fine with me being away for 3 months right in the first year,
Mhm.
which a lot, I would say most founders probably have never been away from their business for 3 months, much
Yep.
less in the very first year. So, I knew that I wanted to be able to take that time off. I've never been a super hardcore hustle, work all the time type of entrepreneur anyway. I'm a big believer that you should build a business that you love and that supports your life. So I knew that I wanted to build something that I could, take periods of time away from, where I could travel or spend time with my family, and eventually work myself out of entirely. So at about the 4 to 5 year mark, I promoted the person who had been our head of operations to a president role. So I still obviously do promotional stuff like this. I'm
Yep.
still hanging out on our Slack, and I still have calls with the president, but I don't have any other like direct reports or like, execution work that I do in the company.
Right. So this is what I found really fascinating, just like you mentioned, because since you built MeetEdgar since day one, you were on the mindset that you want to build a company that won't be dependent on you
Mm,
on the long run. Because um, a while ago, I talked to Liam Martin, the founder of a startup called Time Doctor, and he's
mhm,
also the organizer of Friday Remote, which you were was a podcast interviewee. All
mhm,
right, so we're talking about the evolution from the so-called entrepreneur to executive. Like basically, there's a
mm.
lot of entrepreneurs that just cannot let go
Yeah.
of doing day-to-day stuff if they're under your position, right? That can I help you with something? I'm not doing anything right now, and they just can't let go. But I just totally find it fascinating because, like you mentioned, you strive for build a company that okay, how can this company run without me? And then, like you mentioned, you want to have like a great work-life balance
Mm.
or something like. So I totally found this fascinating. So just curious about the trans. Actually, let me take a step back. How big is Mid Edgar now?
We're about 15 people now.
15 people and all 100% distributed.
Yes, but all in the US, except for me. I'm actually in the UK, but the rest of the team is in the US. So we've always had a US based team so that we can all work in the same time zones.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I love to jump to that, like the whole team, a bit later. So, on the transition from kind of like facing out a bit from the company and delegate to the current president. Can you share a bit more, how was it like? Was there any kind of like worry or any kind of how to say uncertainty
Mhm.
with that?
So I did it a year before I planned on doing it. So, she and I had been talking about it, how this was a role that she'd like to move to at some point, and I had sort of told myself, I remember I told myself, okay, in September 2019, that's when she'll start. And I was thinking that kind of a year before, like September
Right.
2018. I'm like, then, I'll have a year to kind of train her and we'll get her ready for that role. And I kind of realized I s- I wish I could remember what I read. But it's so cheesy, but I swear I read some like inspirational quote on Instagram. I was like on Instagram and someone's like, "Why do it tomorrow when you can do it today?" Right? It was just some like really
Yeah,
generic,
yeah, yeah,
cheesy quote, but sometimes something just like strikes you the
yeah.
right way and I was like, "Yeah, why if this is something I know that I want, right? I want to put her in this role and take myself out of this role, why am I waiting a year? Because it's not like I'm going to disappear as soon as she starts. So
Yeah,
whatever kind of like training I imagine I need to do, which of course was very vague. If you'd asked
yeah,
me like, what's that training? I'm like, I don't know. We just
yeah.
need to talk. And like, she's been with the company since day one. Like I've
Oh
been working with
wow.
her really closely since we launched. So it's not like she doesn't, know what's going on. She had always been in charge while I was on leave, right? Like she was plenty prepared. So I just realized, like, well, whatever this vague idea of training that I have, I mean, wouldn't it
Mm-hmm.
even be more effective once she's in the role? Because then it's not theoretical anyway. Then she's coming to me being like, what do I do about this? And it's like, here's what I would do, instead of like, maybe someday you'll find yourself in this situation. So yeah, so I just talked to her that day and I'm just like, let's like it's time now. Let's just do it. So it just I think it just shows that you never feel totally prepared and totally
True.
ready. You just have to make that call and go for it and see what happens.
Right. So when you decided that one day you'll be transitioning to be less hands-on, as the process goes, did you share this gradually to the whole team?
Well, it it was always kind of the role that I had with the team. Like I said,
Ah, I see.
I was never that founder that was like first in, last out. Like
Got
I
it.
worked after the first leave, I was just working part-time. So people were always used to me and I'm not a micromanager. They weren't like, "Oh, Laura's like double checking everybody's work with everything." People were used to me having kind of that distance, so
Mm-hmm.
it was a very natural progression.
Got it. Amazing. I'm just curious, like this is a very trivial question, but
Mhm.
how did you guys decide on the name of the title president?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? So
Yeah.
really, it's just, I mean, it's sort of arbitrary, but we don't have any quote unquote C-suite
Yeah.
titles at our company.
Yeah.
And like, we also don't use VP titles. So it's like, okay, I don't think like CEO is quite right. And she's also not, some people use like general manager, but it just sounds like, I don't know, it sounds very retail-y to me to have a general manager.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we just decided on president because it sounds like I wanted it to be clear that she's the leader of the company. It's not like I'm the leader and she's the operator, like she's the leader. So yeah, we just chose president, but it's definitely kind of arbitrary.
Yeah. So I noticed it a while ago. Did you realize that in a lot of bigger startups, there's a lot of vice president, but there are no presidents?
Yeah, like who's the president?
Who's
Everyone's
president?
the vice.
Like there's only Joe Biden here, but there's no Obama. Like this kind of weird. All right. So now currently you are more like hands off with the company. You
Mm.
also like this year you opened a strategic coaching consultation. And why did you decide to do that?
Well, so there were two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One is that I had time. Like seriously, I was just like, what do I do with myself? I mean, you kind of mentioned that a lot of people have this time, so they start like
Right.
digging in and micromanaging the business. So
Right.
I think it's true that you have to give yourself something else
It's the
to
outlet.
do.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I love talking to entrepreneurs. I was also interested in researching the coaching and consulting industry. I'm actually probably going to release software in that space at some
Amazing.
point in the future. We'll keep it very vague for now. So, the best way to get to know an industry is to really dive into it. So that's what I've done.
Great. Huh. That's interesting. So yeah, this is kind of like teaser trailer for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So you Meet Edgar. Sorry, can you remind me again when did Meet Edgar start? 2015?
2014.
2014, right.
Mhm.
Um so it's been like, around 5 years now. So
Mhm.
can you were there any some what were some of the challenges, mistakes you've made or lessons if you've learned as a leader, while running Meet Edgar? Can it, especially when it comes to team management or
Mm.
anything?
I mean, we've had a lot of ups and downs at Edgar. I mean, we've had to do layoffs, which is the worst. We had to do layoffs because we had a huge drop in our revenue and lost a lot of customers after there were some changes to Twitter in particular, and also losing access to Facebook groups for a while. So, I mean, we've been through ups and downs for for sure. It's been
Yeah.
like a lot has happened over the 5 years. And I mean, one of the biggest lessons has been the value of transparency, of really sharing everything with your
Right.
team. We've always been a very transparent company. We share all of our financials aside from individual salaries. You can see, like, honestly, you can kind of ballpark it, because if you really want to dig, you
Yeah.
can kind of find like, this is a development team salary and you know how
Yeah.
many people are there, right?
Yeah.
And we like people to have some sort of ballpark of how much different roles are paid, because my point of view is like, you never want to be shocked. I don't want someone
Yeah.
who is in a customer service role to be shocked that a developer makes more than them. A developer does make more than them. That shouldn't be a secret, you
Yeah.
know. So we're very financial. We're very transparent with our financials, and that was a really fascinating thing when it came to the layoffs. So people had seen that, our expenses had become too high for our revenue. So when we did lay people off, a lot of the people that were affected, it was definitely negative for them, but they were like, I've been looking for another job because I saw I saw that the finances weren't going well, which is funny, but it's like, that's actually great as
Hmm.
as the founder, right? That's kind of
Right,
what you
right.
want, is it for
Yeah,
it to be the least crushing blow
yeah,
possible for them, because it's like, yeah, people are smart, people
yeah.
see if things aren't going well. And that was such a huge lesson to me, of like just sort of the unexpected ways that it pays off. And it's really
Right.
important to us to share all information. Anyone can sit in on any meeting, anyone can see any document. Like, stuff is not siloed to different people
Mm-hmm.
or different departments, because people can just make much better decisions when they understand everything that's going on across
Right.
the company.
Right. When you well, during the layoff, like you mentioned that because of transparency, was there like a feeling that actually the people who was unfortunate at that time was kind of like still rooting for MeetEdgar, right? Because of the transparency that you gave along the way. Like, I know this is something you have to do, but I'm still rooting for you. I'll just go find another job. Let's keep contact. Was it that kind of feeling?
It really, yeah. I mean, I got positive emails from, I think, every single person that was
Mm-hmm.
affected, because we also gave severance. We gave
Oh yeah.
2-month severance, which, in America, you're not required to give anything. 2 months is kind of considered a pretty good amount. So people really appreciated that we did that we made the decision early enough to be able to do that. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy to say that I've really maintained. There's also been people that I've let go over the years that I've also maintained really positive
Right.
relationships with, because that too, that should never be a surprise, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
fired from your job, it should not be a shocker that day. There should be lots of conversations leading
Yeah.
up to it where you know that it's not a match. So that's been the case.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So right, just before the call, I mentioned to you that I kind of scroll up into your Twitter feed. So that's how I do research, by the way. So there is this you mentioned about not delivering criticism on Slack, which I totally understand because I
Mm,
think there are times where my manager, my boss, kind of like say this on Slack, but it out of context and in text it sounds like severe, it sounds really bad,
yeah.
but when you talk it out, it's actually not that bad. So I'm just curious, it's kind of leading this curiosity about your one-on-ones with
hmm
your team members, like delivering criticism or praise and whatnot. So can you share a bit more how do you do one-on with your direct reports?
hmm So I'm definitely a believer in praise in public, criticize in private. So I try to do a lot of public praise on Slack where everyone can
Mm-hmm.
see it. But yeah, if I'm giving someone critical feedback, it really always needs to be a video call. If I can't do a one-on-one meeting with them, I will literally just record a little video of myself talking and email it to them, because like you said, the context is so important. If you
Yep.
write in text like, hey, I found these mistakes on your report, that sentence alone in text, people can spin all sorts of stories
Yep.
about what it means. And are they saying I shouldn't do these reports anymore? And they're taking this away from my plate. And are they going to fire me now? Or like just saying it in a video, being like, oh, hey, I found these 3 mistakes. So go ahead and, fix them. Let me know when you've done that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such like a different
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really try not to hold back on criticism, which is something that I've had to work on. It can be uncomfortable giving people
Interesting.
critical feedback, but it's really important. I just try to think, okay, if I find myself thinking something in my head, I need to share it with them. I mean, unless I'm just venting, right? Which we all have like bad days where we're
Yep.
like, Jovian, that guy's the worst. Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't share that.
Uh,
But if you're like, oh, like Jovian made this video and I wish he had like made it faster. He takes too long to get to the point. If I'm watching the video thinking that, like, I should share that with you because I have something useful for you and useful for the whole company
True.
to make our work better. So
Mm.
I am, direct with people. I do share critical feedback in a kind way, not in a,
Yeah, yeah,
an aggressive way, but with the idea that we're all we're all working together doing our best. So we all want to improve what that is.
yeah. I do find it interesting though, like you mentioned, like the context or the media where you transmit the feedback is super important,
Mm,
especially when you are the CEO,
mm,
because in any way your voice will be the loudest.
Yes.
For me, I tend to think about the negative part. And
Uh-huh.
probably if you Slack me, like, okay, that's it, I'm going to fire. Like, I'll probably reply you with like,
Right.
okay, when's my last day? When's my last? I'm turning back my company laptop. So yeah, it's totally important. I think this is also something. So I talked to a startup founder named Justin Mitchell. He worked for not he worked. He found a startup called Yak Chat. It's basically you can send voice message
Mm,
via on Slack and or other
mhm.
on the app itself. What I find interesting is basically like when you talk it out, when you talk something out, it's either you're getting stuff like you're more aware of what
Yeah.
you want to convey, and you kind of soften your tone and whatnot, and or when you even when you have when you're trying to convey an idea, you want to talk
Mhm.
something, but when you talk it out, you're probably in the middle. Hey, this often actually not that important. So and then
Mhm.
you save time instead of like back and forth via Slack.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just found it interesting. So I've when I'm doing this research for this podcast, so I've something that you repeated when it comes to remote team management is that you're missing this quote unquote overheard moments.
Mm,
Like you cannot see if you're a marketing team, you cannot actually hear the sales calls that the sales teams are
mhm.
making, and in your product team, you cannot hear what the marketing is planning about. And I totally can relate to that because I only transitioned to remote work, to working remotely in this past 6 months. And then I do miss it. Like sometimes I'm kind of like out of the loop of what
Mhm.
happens. So yeah, you mentioned that the way to avoid this is being about being as public as possible on Slack. Would love for you to expand on this,
Yeah.
and would love to if there any other else that you can replicate this thing that can spark creativity.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that we do is have a lot of meetings. I think it's very popular right now to be like, "Oh, meetings, yuck."
Meetings are bad. Yeah.
Meetings are bad. Meetings are so uncool. But especially being remote, having a company-wide meeting every week where everyone's there on video discussing what's going on with the entire company, I think is really important for keeping people on the same page because like you really have to put it in front of people. Like if you're like, oh well, you know what, our marketing agendas are public and anyone could go look at them, it's like, well
Oh,
yeah, but like what developer has plenty to do? They're not going to spend their time like going to look at the agenda for a marketing meeting. I mean, I do think it's important that all that stuff is available and easily accessible, which it is, but it's just like, how many people are actually going to do that? Whereas if it's like, okay, well, we have a company wide meeting, everyone's sitting there, you can be thinking about something else, but hopefully at least part of your brain is a
yeah,
little
yeah, yeah,
engaged in
yeah.
hearing the update from ops and marketing and development. So I think a lot of meetings are important. We also really try to limit private messages. So this one is interesting because there's just been, as we're recording this big controversy from the
Yep,
company Away,
yep,
where they had the same rule about no private messages, and things did not go well for them.
yep.
you know, and this
That is.
this rule was sort of blamed for
I'm
it.
just grabbing my popcorn, like just saying on Twitter, "Oh,
Yeah,
this is what happens right now."
right.
Yeah, uh,
um, so we try to limit private messages as much as possible because of course if something is in a direct message nobody else can see it,
yep,
and we found that this actually is a little challenging for people because people often feel like, oh, I don't want to like clog up Slack with my little side conversation. If they're having a specific conversation asking someone like, oh, where can I find this file? It's not in the Google Doc. Is it somewhere else? But little things like that, if you put them in a Slack channel, you can search for them later, or other
yes,
people can
right.
see, like, oh, I thought we didn't have that file anymore, but now she's talking about it. Do we still use that? Like, there's just a lot of little connections that happen when people can see
Yep.
everything. So I think that no private messages rule is a really good rule.
Yeah, I think people kind of like underestimate this subconscious creativity that comes. So that's
Mm,
why if you're in the office, like I say, over here, like
yeah.
the vibe, and I think you kind of get replicated by being um, public as possible on
Hmm.
Slack message. Cool. And just curious, like, what are some special or fun things that you guys do at Meet Edgar to keep the culture great?
So, it's always challenging being remote. You're always trying to find little ways that you can
Yeah.
connect. One that we've done that's fun is watching a movie together. So, like, all watching the same movie at the same
Right.
time, and then doing like a little group chat about the movie. A lot of this stuff honestly feels really cheesy, but it's just kind of what you have to do in a
Yeah.
remote company.
Yeah. So that's a movie. Anything else, or just like small stuff that you can?
Yeah, I mean, we do arrange group chats for people
I see.
to have just like video chats with like 2 to 4 people, which again, it feels really awkward at first. Like for the
Yeah.
first like minute or two, you're like, okay, what are we supposed to chat about? But we find that it gets not awkward right
Mm-hmm.
away. And I think that's really important because one of the weird things about being remote, our company is really small, right? We're about 15
Yeah.
people. If we were together in an office, everyone would have had lunch and coffee and everything with everyone else because it's only 15 people. Like that's a very small group
True.
in person.
Yes. Yes.
But the problem is being remote, there are some people whose jobs just don't interact. Like if you're a back end developer, you don't really need to talk to the person that writes our blog. Like you guys just don't have usually any work that overlaps, or like you maybe don't need to talk to our finance person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that you're creating these opportunities. And of course we do have in-person meetups, but you can't just rely on
Yeah.
that. So these casual chats and movies and stuff like that is just a way to make sure that the finance person and the designer are getting a chance to get to know each other because they might not get that chance.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. So what we do in ARC is basically we are like around 30 people now.
Mm,
So what we do is, so we are like a hybrid team. Like a lot of us are co-located in Taipei, Taiwan, but some of them are distributed in North America. So what we usually do is we celebrate birthdays. So let's say if you are a June baby, and after your birthday, we'll celebrate by the May baby. People who are born in May are responsible to help you
uh,
just do like a really small thing.
uh,
So when we are celebrating the birthdays of people who are remote, we are basically just using Zoom or using Owl. I just create like some bad like Jeopardy quiz like online where people can participate on Slack.
uh,
Like okay, like for example, or like who wants to be a millionaire? Okay, ask the audience, and then ask the audience, and people just put their emojis on Slack, and these are the answers. So yeah,
uh.
just small things like that. But you mentioned you have an in-person meetups though. Is it like a whole team retreat?
Yeah, whole team retreat we've done sometimes once a year, sometimes twice a year.
Mm-hmm. So was it like really? Oh, were you like very hands-on in like not managing, like arranging the trip,
No,
or?
that is not my skill set. I don't help at all.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just mentioning because this is something that remote companies are trying to dive into more.
Mm,
Because they feel like in-person meetups are super important, and some of the
mm,
most creative initiative from the companies. So, for example, I talked to the CEO of Toggle, Chris Huff. So they have this very cool unicorn startup simulator, and the super fun game, and it came up when during the in-person meetup brainstorm. I think
uh,
people try emulate that more, and also some great projects especially like just came after that.
yeah,
um
something that we found is important for our in person is not to be overscheduled, because I think when you first do them, you're like, here's the breakfast, and then here's the work day, and then here's the activity, and then here's the meeting, and then here's drinks, and here's dinner. And like these are all people that choose to work alone from home. Like not everybody wants to spend all day together.
yeah.
So now like we have time at, every day we have at least like 2 or 3 hours kind of in between like the workday and
Yeah.
dinner. just don't have anything scheduled, because the people who are really social and want to hang out, like they'll make it happen anyway. Someone will be like, I'm going here if anybody, wants to come with, and then people can. But like, we're a software company, right?
Right.
We're talking about a bunch of developers who work
Yeah.
remotely, like often not people who want to be social all
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that these are the people who choose to not meet people in real life.
Right.
Like that's why they are working remotely. Like they hate people. No, just kidding. But yes, that's fine, hilarious. But I did see some degree of truth in it. I forgot. I forgot which company. They basically, again, like on their meetups, they have this like free time. They even get their budget. Okay,
Mm,
give you like couple $100. Do what you want to do in this beach.
mm.
Just don't drown or something like that.
Just
Uh,
don't drown. Yeah. And
right.
we're also really clear that the social stuff, like, because we have dinners and social stuff in the evening, we're very clear that you don't have, there's no pressure to go to that. I mean, people obviously
Yeah.
do go most days, but like, if you just feel like being by yourself one evening, you don't have to make up some elaborate excuse. You can just not go,
Right.
and no one's going to give you a hard time, and it's totally okay.
Yeah. So so I've interviewed a couple of remote startup leaders, remote startup companies. So one of the topic that always came when it comes to employee management or team management is the onboarding for new
Mhm.
employees. Can you share a bit more? What does the onboarding looks like for new hires in MeetEdgar?
Yeah, so I think something funny about being remote is the first question we always have to address is, how do I show up on the first day? If you're at an in-person office, you know how to show up. You walk into the office at 9 o'clock. But when you're remote, people are like, do I send an email to someone and say, I'm working now? Like, what do I do? So at our company, you know that you're working if you're on Slack. If you're signed on to Slack, that means you're
Right.
working. If you're not signed on to Slack, that means that you're not working. So, we tell people that we give people a first friend, and your first friend is someone who you can ask any question, so that if you're not sure who to ask, you know who your first friend is, and you can say, where do these documents live, or how do we do this, how do we do that. We try to give people a really thorough tour of all the departments and not just their
Mm-hmm.
department, so they're understanding, kind of what is like our basic marketing strategy, what does
Right.
our development process look like how do we handle finances at our company, because we are a small company, so you
Yeah.
can kind of get to know everyone and get to understand everything. And we give people a lot of time. Like the first week, we assume that you're just going to be like chatting to people, poking around, reading through documents, reading through meeting notes. We don't start off with like, here's your project on the first
Got
day.
it. Yeah. You mentioned about like giving quote unquote tours like for the new hires. So what does this tour entail? Is basically just like, let's say there's a lead developer that just go like one-on-one call with you and present you with like 30 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of it is one-on-one
I see.
calls with people from all over the company, and they might kind of show you things that you can explore more on your own. So yeah, you might have a call with someone from our customer service department, and they're like, here's where our help docs live, here's how we kind of think about constructing them, here's like the resources that we use when we make them. You can read through more of them later. Here's like the top questions that our customers have, here's the pages that get the most
Yeah.
views.
Right. So yeah, Meet Edgar is a very small company. So so when when I was doing research, I was like, I probably guess you'll have like 25, 30 people at least.
Mm.
And I realized we're like 15. I was kind of surprised, but actually not that surprised because I also been following your writings and whatnot. Um, so this small team, is it like by design? Like, is this something that you want to cap on?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we have been larger before. And I think a lot of companies go through this experience where maybe they at first are sort of excited about growing, and then maybe something happens where they get smaller, and then they're like, oh, wait, I thought I wanted to be bigger, but I want to be smaller. and
Yep.
small and small is really great. And I think the interesting thing about being small is like, it's such a balance, right? Because of course there's only so many things that you can achieve as a 15-person team, right? It's just
True.
it's a limited resource set. You cannot do all the things at once.
Yeah.
But almost everyone prefers smaller teams. Like it's very unusual to meet someone that's like, I'd rather be on an 80-person team than a 10-person team. Most humans enjoy how smaller teams operate.
Mm.
So we're definitely a company that wants to remain very small. We are happy growing a bit slower and having a smaller team, or we're happy never being, a $500 million company. That's not
Yeah.
really the path that we're on.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you nail it on the head. Like, I think lots of entrepreneurs like being in a small company, but most of them don't want to admit it
Right.
because they feel like, oh, everything is about scaling. So I listened to this rework podcast with a from Basecamp, like David Heinemeier Hansen, the CTO of Basecamp, was talking to the CEO. Oh no, the CEO, sorry, the founder of One Password, Dave Tier. So they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about DHH, which is David Heinemeier Hansen, talked about stories like he heard a lot of stories about startup founders that just don't feel like they don't love their companies anymore just because it grew too
Mm-hmm.
big and they prefer when it was smaller. They don't find the joy in it. So again, yes, I totally agree. I feel like most people, especially, okay, one of the things that comes to mind, especially when you're building a remote company, when you grow bigger, let's say you have 100 people, it's really hard to scale again with the process and documentation and
Yeah.
whatnot. So the so-called like communication debt will just, or the
Mm-hmm.
process debt will just stack up. Is there any particular thing that you think Meet Edgar does really well or emphasize more compared to other companies when it comes to culture, or something that you personally really quite proud of?
Our working hours. It's
Interesting.
it's sad that this is a point of differentiation, but we work 40-hour work weeks every week. There's no exceptions to that. There's
Yeah.
no crunch time. Our team has 4 weeks vacation, which again in America is considered a lot, and we don't work on the evenings or the weekends. So that means that you will get no emails. There will be no Slack messages. It's just not what we do.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to be able to give people a job that they can really enjoy and work really hard during the workday, and then they can unplug and be off.
Hmm. Yeah, I think again, it's a lot of. I think a lot of remote companies are proud of. For example, companies like Basecamp, they're a huge proponent of 40 hours work week. I think the
Mm,
main difference between MeetEdgar and Basecamp, like how they work, they they are the big proponent of a asynchronous work, and
right.
MeetEdgar more synchronous, which is
Yeah.
totally fine. What works for you? Right. And another thing that I want to talk about today is basically the thing that I'm super interested about because I don't think I'm really good at it, is about processes.
Mhm.
Um, so how does the Meet Actor team go about documenting stuff in general?
Mhm.
And yeah, I just want to start with that first.
So we use Tetra for our company wiki. I think they're a really great product. Uh, and we have a company wiki, which I assumed that every company did, but now
Yeah.
I've come to find out a lot of companies just don't have like any
I think
documentation.
it's more like they have it, but they're just too lazy to update it. Like nobody
Yeah,
knows when to update it, right?
right, right. So yeah, we use basically like the company wiki is used for things like processes or like directories or things that don't get updated very much. And then Google Docs is used for more living documents or more like, like if there's a series of emails, like the actual copy of the emails will live within Google Docs. So it's
Right.
not like, it's kind of the actual work, not like the overview of something. And then we use a lot of just like pinning in Slack channels is also just a really good way
Ah,
to organize things.
that
So
is interesting. Yeah.
every department in their Slack channel, they have like Usually a little kind of short list of what their priorities are, and then that might be linked to like a document where it goes more in depth, or it might just be a little Slack note like, here's the top 3 things for us right now. There's going to be a link to their meeting agenda notes so that everyone can find that easily. If there's like a big project that they're working on right now, there's going to be a little overview of that pinned. So we found that's a great way to organize information too.
Got it. So is the team lead, or in your case, it's called team advocates, I think, like
Hmm.
marketing advocates, are
Hmm.
they the one who are somewhat responsible to keep that intact?
Yeah, they're responsible for it. We also have someone on our operations team who is kind of like a helper for the entire team. So she'll help kind of remind, she'll kind of look around and be like, okay, you don't have your priorities updated, go ahead
Yeah.
and fill that in here. So she kind of helps remind people to do that.
Mhm. I think this role is really underrated, especially in remote companies. I
Yeah.
think there's someone that has to just go and like, okay, is this updated or not? There's someone that has this, this focus. And by the way, I just want to just sidetrack a little bit. Um, the team leads in MeetEdgar is not called managers; it's called
Hmm.
advocates, right?
Hmm.
Can you share a bit more why advocates?
Yeah, so we came up with that word because we were like, okay, what should we call it, right? Because we're not, like we talked about, we're not doing VP. We don't use
Yeah,
VP title. Like
yeah,
manager feels a little old school
yeah.
to call someone a manager. So we're like, okay, well, what are they doing? They're really advocating for both their team members, and they're
Interesting.
advocating for their like department and the company. So if you are the customer experience advocate, it's just sort of, I think it's a way to emphasize the idea of what some people call servant leadership, that the director or the manager is serving their team instead of the team serving the director. So your advocate is advocating for you, the members of the
Yeah.
customer experience team, and is also advocating when we're talking with the leadership team of the company. They're like, hey, this is why customer experience is important and needs priority and needs resources and all that.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting because as you're talking, like I realized the name advocate, like if someone called me like, marketing advocate, it's more like evangelist or something like this. Like
Hmm.
I'm not managing.
Right.
I mean, technically I'm managing someone, but it's more like, it's not like I look down at managing, but like
Hmm.
I advocate, I look up to the C-suite, for example, that I want to advocate this stuff for my team. And this is the project that I propose, for example.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and we wanted to have a word for it because we're also very clear that we're not a flat
Yeah.
organization. Like it's not, a few years, it's not so popular anymore, but a few years ago it was like holacracy is big, right? And being flat is big. And we've always been a company that's like, no, we're very organized in exactly what your role is. Everyone needs to know who their boss is, because that's another thing that, especially in remote companies, I guess it's easy to just sort of leave everything very loose. And we're
Yeah.
really a big fan of clarity and just making things really clear for people. So if you're like, oh, well, you don't, everyone just takes ownership and you don't really have a boss, it's like, well, then who determines my salary? Like, can someone else fire me? And it's like, no, actually, you do have a boss. We're just gonna pretend like no one knows who it is.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
we're not going to pretend. We're just going to tell you, like, no, this person is like this person is your boss. So know that. But yeah, they're also advocating for you.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a good segue to my next the next thing I want to talk about is Meet Edgar, like you guys has have no deadlines.
Yeah. So we do still largely operate without deadlines. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why, so something to know about our company is we're totally self serve. We don't do any custom work. So that also means like we don't have a sales team, we don't
Yeah.
have any enterprise clients. We've never written a line of code for a specific client, right? So that means that we can be really flexible. Like, obviously, we work for our customers and that we create a product for them, but we never promise any public deadlines for features or anything like that. I mean, we have an audience of developers here. I don't need to explain why.
Yeah.
It can be a bad idea to
Yeah.
publicly promise a
Yeah.
deadline for a software feature. Um, so that means that we found that it's often more useful to be really specific about the scope of a project rather than the deadline. So if we're, developing a feature, for example, getting really, really clear before we start on exactly what this means, exactly what it includes, exactly what it doesn't include. And then, of course, we all want to make sure we're on the same page as far as like, is this a 1 hour project? Is this a 6 month project?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you need to have some idea of how long it's going to take. But the reason that we don't have deadlines is because we've found that you can't have strict deadlines and have a no crunch time culture, which is what we have, right? If you have a deadline, you're going to have to work overtime sometimes to make the deadline. That's just how it is. If you're like, it has to get done by Friday, no matter what, well, you're going to have to work late Friday night sometimes to make that happen. And what we find is like, we're like, okay, this is what needs to happen. Like we just released our Android app. And, we're a small team. There was only one developer who was working on the Android app. It was just his project. Well, he ended up having a longer vacation scheduled right when the project was supposed to be wrapping up. That's just sort of how the timing worked out. So it didn't finish until he got back from vacation. That's just how it was. And like, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like we hadn't promised to our clients that it was going to be live on a certain day. In the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter if the Android app goes live today or 2 weeks from today. If we had said, no, this is absolutely the deadline, we would have had to say to him, you know what, you had this vacation scheduled, but guess what? It ended up falling at the time where the project needs to be done, so you can't take the vacation. Like, if you want to have strict deadlines, that's just what goes with it. So we're like, we're going to have a clear project scope, and then it's going to get done when it gets done.
Yeah, I do find it interesting because I find it interesting because on one hand, I feel like MeetEdgar is actually pretty structured when it comes to
Mm,
remote companies. The I don't want to say strict, but like consistent working hours,
yeah.
and how people should be in Slack. But on the other hand, there's this not non-anxiety inducing, like there's no deadlines as long, and there's a level of trust. I
Mm,
trust you guys to do your best work for the
yeah.
company, and when it's done, it's done. If it's not done, I trust you will continue it. You won't, this app won't like 10 years and it's not done. Like there's a certain level of trust on it.
And I mean, we would talk about it, right? If we're like,
Yeah.
this is taking a month longer than we thought it would. Like, what's happening here? Like, obviously, those conversations are gonna
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I can see it. Like there's no deadlines, but like passive aggressive, not passive aggressive, but like it's been like 3 months, and then but when there's a new hire, I'm not sure if you hired someone new recently, but there's a new hire that they're pretty used to deadlines, or at least
Mhm.
have a soft deadline. Do they feel anxious or something like that?
I don't think so because people are always welcome to do it for themselves,
Okay,
and
yeah.
I think that's something that we've discovered is to really let people have their own style of work. And that also means, like, I remember for a long time, I was like, everyone at the company has to use the same project management system. And we can never find something that worked for the marketing team and the development team. And it was this stupid, like, thorn in our side. Like, are we going to use Trello or Asana or Pivotal Tracker, right? Like, and then we're like, you know what? Different departments can use different things.
Yep.
It's okay. So if the way that someone works is they're like, I love deadlines, I love to have my work mapped out every day that I'm going to do, it's like, cool, go for it.
Mhm. Yeah. The thing, oh my God, the thing that you say is basically the bane of my existence. Because like just a while ago, a lot of the marketing team members like to use Asana. And I
Uh,
was like, I don't like Asana. And there's me, and they look at me like I'm a pagan or something like that. Why don't you believe in our God, Asana?
right.
Like it's crazy. But yes, I think it all depends, again, back to like documentation and what. By the way, just like mention about documentation. Um, how do you avoid over documentation, or was there even any problem like this before in
We
MidEdgar?
haven't had too much problem with over documentation. I mean, our philosophy is just do it messy and do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to have things written somewhere. Like, and this is also something we've gone back and forth on over the years. Like, we've tried to create these really lovely, project templates. And it's like, okay, here's the template, and you fill out all these parts where we found that sometimes, I guess that can be over documentation and kind of slow you down. Whereas if you just have a Google Doc and you're like, okay, here's the 6 things you need to know about this project, and they're written in the Google Doc, and the document has a clear name that you
Yeah.
can search for. I'm always adding just random words to my Google Doc titles of like things, words that I might look up. It's like finance, money, operations, financial,
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm like, which of those words will I like
Right.
type in when I'm looking for this
Yeah.
later? Honestly, as long as you have that, we just kind of try to encourage people. It's better to just put it down somewhere. Don't wait till you have this like beautiful, perfectly organized document.
Right. Yeah. So Laura, so we've been talking about a lot of stuff like transparency, documentation. I just want to end this with that you guys have this handbook, like the MeetEdgar handbook,
Mm.
that you've published for so other companies can learn from or even copy that. So I thought as you guys made it public in 2017.
Mhm.
Can you share a bit more about why?
Yeah, so we found that we were a lot more organized than most other small
Okay.
companies. Like I said, I was surprised that some companies, yeah, have no documentation, or like you said, it's just a bunch of stuff that's 5 years out of date and no one's ever looked at it.
Yeah.
Um, we also have always been really good at clear policies, and I think what you kind of spoke to earlier is finding this balance of having a lot of like boundaries and a lot of certainty combined with giving people a lot of responsibility and a lot of freedom. And we've found that having clear parameters actually gives people the freedom to not worry about that. Like one
Yes.
example is I am not a believer in unlimited vacation time, because I think unlimited vacation time means figure out with the back channels how much vacation time you're actually allowed to use, right? There is a norm that the company is okay with, so just tell people what the norm is, right? Or like we found, even for things that seem really silly, like we found it was really stressful for people. They would go to a conference and we're like, okay, book a hotel room on your company credit card, and people would feel really stressed about how much money that should cost. They're like, do I need to scour the city and find the cheapest possible hotel room, or is it okay to stay in the conference hotel room that costs, twice as much as the one down the street? Like, which one is okay? So giving people these specifics of like, we literally write, here's how much hotel rooms, obviously depends on the city, but like, here's the range of how much hotel rooms cost per night. Giving people that kind of information is very freeing and really allows them to focus on their work
Yep.
instead of hotel room stress. So we released the handbook because we found that a lot of companies felt really lost as far as like, what should HR policies be? How do I, especially for new entrepreneurs that are hiring their first few people, how do I do time off? How do I do sick time? Like, what should the policy be? So we're like, we found some things that work pretty well for us and we have them documented. We'll just put it out there and share it with you. And we've had a bunch of emails from founders that are like, thank you, I just copied exactly what you wrote.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
took your handbook and I made that
Right.
my handbook.
Mm.
And obviously it'll evolve for them over time with their company, but we love when people do that.
Yeah, I like the handbook because it's quite simple compared to other
Mm.
companies. Like some other company have their internal handbook, which is also great, but it's MeetEdgar's version is just simple. It's a one pager, right? It's a one pager, almost one pager.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little more, but
Oh, there's more. Oh my God, sorry. Yeah,
but yeah,
but yeah,
we try to keep it simple and not like legalese, right? Just giving people the information that they need.
yeah. All right, awesome. Yeah, so Laura, this has been an absolutely fantastic chat. It's really fun chat. So, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so you can find MeetEdgar, MEetEdgar, meetedgar.com, MeetEdgar on the social media. We do have a coupon code for podcast listeners. It's podcast, all caps, gets you your first month free in MeetEdgar, podcast, all caps. And I blog at lauraroeder.com, or you can find me on Twitter at LKR.
Yeah. So for the listeners, you can find all of these in the show notes. And don't forget to follow Laura and Medium and Twitter. And she has this 3-letter media Twitter handle, so you know that she's legit. So yeah, Laura, thank you so much again for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Outside the Valley, brought to you by ARC. We created this podcast with the hope that in each episode, you can learn something new from other remote startup people. So if you have any feedback or suggestions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at jovian@arc.dev. It's JOVIAN at arc.dev. Or you can find us on Twitter at arc.dev. See you next week with another episode of Outside the Valley, and ciao.